Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. John, how are you?
How are things with you, Marc?
Not bad. We're continuing our Health is Wealth series, and we brought on a special guest, Caryn O'Sullivan. Caryn's a clinical nutritionist with an MS Nutrition and Integrative Health from Maryland University of Integrative Health. She's currently working toward her board certification as a nutrition specialist, which is the gold standard of professional certification for advanced nutrition professionals. She also has 12 years experience as a certified integrative nutrition health coach and holds certifications in Chinese dietary therapy, food therapy, and food as medicine. Caryn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
So how did you get into nutrition? I know you have a master's degree in it. Was it something that you started really getting into in school, or something you were passionate about early on, or something that triggered you to get involved in it?
Well, it definitely wasn't in school. I was actually went to the University of Iowa for journalism and communications with my heart set on becoming a PR power woman. And when I was after I had graduated, I had moved to Europe, lived there for a few years. And when I moved to London, I was around 23. My whole world got turned upside down. I started experiencing a variety of health problems. So one of which I started losing my hearing. I started developing ringing in my ears and hearing loss. And nobody could tell me what was going on with me. I was from doctor to doctor. There were no answers. So long story short, I turned to alternative medicine and acupuncture to help get over the hump of that. And my acupuncturist at the time was like, well, let's take a look at your diet. And at the time I was eating a diet that was, heavy, standard American diet, focused on dairy and gluten and sugar, a lot of processed foods, and not really supporting my body in a nutritional way. So I started making some dietary changes and realizing how much better I felt energy-wise and digestion-wise, and really got into wanting to figure out why. So I started reading more and more about health and about nutrition. That led me to becoming a certified health coach at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And my journey just continued from there. I got fascinated with looking at Chinese medicine and how that philosophy looks at the body and nutrition and how we, interact with nature. Looking at Ayurveda, from another different point of view, and looking at how food can be medicine for the body. So from there, the journey continued and eventually led me, after I had 2 kids and got over the hump of toddlers and preschoolers and all that, I decided to dive in further to learn more of the research and scientific side and more the clinical nutrition side. And that's just recently completed my master's of science there. So that's the short version of the story. But my health, my poor health is what eventually led me to doing what I do now. It got me into it, totally derailed my path and put me on the right one.
Sure. I think it's no secret that, there's nutrition issues in the country. There's obesity issues in the country. Why do people struggle with it so much? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it lack of money? Is it time? What are some of or maybe a combination of different things, but what are some of the reasons why there's so much of a struggle with it?
Well, I think the 3 things you just mentioned are the 3 most important things. And definitely a lack of time, a lack of knowledge, a lack of skill in the kitchen. We've become very disconnected from food and from nature. So people just haven't had that, traditional knowledge of cooking and food being passed down to them anymore. Money is certainly an obstacle. Our food isn't prioritized anymore, and food has become very expensive as well. It's actually harder to eat on a healthy diet because our government subsidies are going towards the cheaper foods. and the processed foods. So that not a lot of people don't have access to healthy foods. Especially if you look in the inner cities and so forth, there's not a lot of access to farm fresh fruits and vegetables. So I think there's a lot of different factors of what's contributing to the obesity and diabetes epidemics in this country, and as well as poor health in general.
So where does someone start? Let's say they, like we were talking, this year has been definitely a trigger for some people to say, all right, it's time now to get better nutrition, better eating, but they're working against years and years of bad habits where they're fighting against. Where does someone start if on that path to starting to eat better?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good point there. I always say you start with one step. Yeah, it's one step forward to begin your health journey. So one thing I like to tell my clients, first thing we'll always look at is hydration, and that doesn't involve money. So are you properly hydrated? Are you a lot of the things that we take in and we drink these days are actually dehydrating, like coffee and sodas. So are you consuming enough water? And that's always the first step, because hydration is involved in every single process in the body, right? And if you're not hydrated properly, you can become fatigued, you can get headaches, you can get brain fog, you can have digestive issues. So that's always a great place to start. And then, if you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, adding more of those into your diet really help to create more energy in your life and in your body. So those are two places that we can start.
Maybe you could give us a little bit of insight into what exactly integrative medicine and integrative nutrition is at a high level.
For integrative nutrition and functional nutrition is looking more at like the root of the problem. So whereas, in our Western world, we're very much focused on symptoms and covering up symptoms and not so much of a focus on the root. So what is causing the fatigue in that person? What is causing the energy imbalance? What is causing the headaches? And so as a clinical nutritionist, I'm digging a little bit deeper into that, not just saying, okay, so we need to take this or take this to relieve the headaches or the digestive upset, but more so, why is this happening in the first place? Is it a dietary issue? Is it a lifestyle issue? Is it, is it stress that could be causing the problem? When we look at the body in a holistic view, we're not only looking at diet, but we're looking at exercise, relationships, how your career is affecting your life, how your eating habits are affecting your life. So not just what you're eating, but how you're eating as well. Are you sitting down when you eat? Are you chewing your food carefully? Are you stressed out when you eat? Now, all these sorts of things come into play to help the body either create balance or imbalance. So when we look at the body functionally and integratively and holistically, we are looking at the body as a whole and how that body is interacting with the environment as well.
And how does that come out through a consultation with someone or an interview with someone that you're able to kind of look at some of those specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my first consultation with somebody, it can last up to 2 hours. So they do, full intake forms where I'm getting their health history and their medical history and their family's history and looking at all the important events that happened in their life, and kind of putting that together and trying to make some connections. They also do a food diary so we can link what they're eating with possible symptoms. So in that first consult, we really dig deep to 90 minutes to 2 hours to really just investigate what might be going on and how I can put the best recommendations forward to go from there.
Are they usually specific things that I mean, you mentioned you started losing your hearing, which is a very distinct, very noticeable symptom, so you're like, what's going on? And then it eventually led to looking at nutrition in some ways. But is it usually something like that like glaring where they'll come to you and be like, hey, I've explored every option and I have this problem. Can you help me? Or is it just as much people like, hey, look, I just wanted to take a look at this and see if there's some things I can do better?
It could definitely be both. Yeah, there are people who come with clear issues, whether it be acid reflux or digestive issues. It could be somebody coming with, a slow thyroid or hypothyroidism that they've been diagnosed from their doctor. So there are definitely some clear issues that we can work on. And then there are other people who are like, you know what, I'm just really tired. I'm fatigued. I cannot figure out what's going on. My blood work's coming back perfect. I can't figure out the root of the problem. So that's when we start looking at all the different systems in the body and how that body is interacting and what sort of stresses or triggers might be on the body to drain it and to create that fatigue and to create that exhaustion. So, and definitely both ways.
On looking at that fatigue, are you going to make that diagnosis to look, okay, here's the nutrition issue, here's some stress that you have going on, here's maybe you're not sleeping right, and kind of come up with all these things are impacting and thus causing that fatigue that someone is having?
Yeah, I like to look at physical stress, emotional stress, mental, environmental, and then how food plays into all of that. So, for example, if you have, fatigue can come from a variety of issues, right? It can come from food sensitivities or food allergies. It can come from a slow thyroid. It can come from digestive issues. It can come from adrenal fatigue. So a lot of different systems in the body, and you can have similar symptoms like headaches and fatigue, but we got to figure out where that's coming from. So, look at, emotional. How is stress affecting that person's life? Because we know stress creates a lot of inflammation in the body, right? And stress really wears down the body. It throws off a lot of different systems in the body. When you look at emotional stress, mental stress, from environmental, like, is that person drinking filtered water or tap water? Does that person have access to fresh air? Are they getting outside a lot, or are they sitting in front of their computer a lot? Are they using, harmful chemicals in their house or their office that could be contributing to, toxic overload in the body? And with food as well, like, is the food organic? Are you eating, a high pesticide load? Are you eating a lot of processed foods or sugars that can drain your body? Or are you eating nutrient dense foods that'll help provide, energy and healing to the body? So, and definitely look at all those different areas. And I've seen cases where diet is great, but I had a client who was drinking, her 80 ounces of water per day, but it was all, fluoridated tap water, and that was really draining her thyroid. So when we removed that and put in filtered water, we saw a lot of differences in how her body was functioning. So you have to look at it from all angles.
I know you mentioned the consultation, but do you also look at someone's blood work?
I do, yeah. And I'll recommend to their doctors if certain blood work needs to be done beyond what was given. But I do a very thorough, lab analysis to see what's going on there too.
Can two people react differently to food? Can food cause issues in one person, even if it's, I'm using the quotes, healthy food? Can it cause issues in one person versus it not in another person?
Oh, absolutely. People can be, as you probably heard, like a lot of gluten sensitivity in the world. People can be intolerant to gluten, allergic to gluten, and other people can have, bread and gluten totally fine. So it really depends on your body, and a lot of different factors go into that. So some people digest dairy better than others. Others are lactose intolerant and cannot tolerate it. Some people, even if you look at healthy foods, you can look at things like tomatoes or citrus fruit, very healthy foods for most people. But for people with acid reflux, that might be a major trigger for them and can cause their symptoms to get worse. So you always have to look at the condition, and you have to look at the person. And then we can look at the food and say, does this food fit this person and their condition? And if not, you can take it out for a little bit of time and see if that could be one of their triggers, and then slowly add it back in to see if that's causing their problems. So absolutely, there's a variety of reasons why certain foods affect different people, but you have to look at the personalized approach to nutrition and really view that person as an individual and not apply any sort of general rules.
I wanted to circle back real quick on gluten, because it's fascinating to me that an entire like category of food has been created around this idea of gluten. But there's also there's a lot of, I want to say, there's competing thoughts on it, and there's like a lot of people who think of it as like just an allergy, and then there's like this idea of intolerance, and there's like it's very like a very confusing to the person who's trying to figure this, at the point where they're trying to figure this stuff out. Could you speak to gluten and like where it stands, and I know you just said that there's things that are specific to each person, but is it overblown? Is it something that we should really be considering, even no matter what condition we might be trying to take care of?
Well, that's a really highly debated question. And you're going to see some experts are going to say no, and others will say absolutely, you have to remove it from your diet. I say, again, we have to look at a personalized approach to nutrition. If somebody is having, problems losing weight, has a lot of inflammation in the body, has a lot of gut issues, or has some thyroid issues, then I would say, yeah, we got to take out the gluten for a bit of time and see if give your body a chance to heal. There are some experts that are in research that's saying that, gluten is highly inflammatory. So regardless, it needs to be taken out of the diet. I think you have to look at, again, a personalized approach. And whenever we're looking at foods like that, we should always go for the highest quality as well and try not to overeat them. If we look again at traditional diets and bringing in some of the philosophies from like Chinese dietary medicine or dietary therapy and Ayurveda, wheat was not meant to be eaten all year round. It's a seasonal food. And so when we eat it in the season that it's harvested, the idea is that the body is going to be able to process it and digest it. Whereas we eat something all year round, we're overexposed to that, and the body has more of a chance of reacting to it. We also have the theory that the pesticides that are sprayed on wheat, which is a lot of pesticides sprayed on wheat, could actually be what some people are reacting to and destroying some of the gut, microbiome, and not allowing us to process wheat or digest it properly, the proteins in it. So there's a lot of different ideas of what could be triggering all this intolerance and all these allergies and sensitivities to gluten just in the last few decades. But I think if you're having clear symptoms, it is definitely something I look at. And one of the first things I may recommend, if I feel that the symptoms fit the need to remove the gluten. Things like brain fog, headaches, weight gain, and fatigue are definitely, four of the top things that I'll look for gluten intolerance. I have also removed gluten from my diet for almost a decade, and just recently started adding in like some organic sourdough bread, and found that does not bother me. But if I were to eat it every day, for some people, it's about the load, how much gluten you're consuming. Some people can have it once a week, others, every day, some maybe once a month or none at all. You really have to start to know your body by process of trial and error.
We have a lot of people that come to us and, they come to us and say, well, I got paid and all of a sudden next thing I know, my money's gone and I'm spending it. They don't know where they're spending it. And we're proponents of tracking their spending. So every time they spend, money on something, they write it down. Is a similar approach productive to do with eating, to just document? People on the spending side, people don't even realize where their money is going, but would it be productive to do that on the food side as well?
To make a budget for the food?
No, not even a budget. Oh. I mean, like some people might not even realize that they're having 2 sodas a day, for example, until they start documenting everything that they're consuming. Like I'm, going back to how does someone improve? Where do they start by just trying to even figure out what the problem is or what they currently are doing? Is that one approach to take?
Yeah, I think food journals and food logs are definitely a great approach. It allows you, one, to see what you're spending your money on with food, and two, like how that food is reacting in your body. So, the important thing to know is that food sensitivities can take up to 72 hours to manifest in the body. So you can have that gluten, and while you may not have any direct reactions, Maybe next day you have a congested sinuses and a stuffy nose. Maybe you have a headache, 2-3 hours later. So taking a food log really allows you to take note of what you're eating and consuming. And then if you're paying attention to the symptoms and tracking the symptoms in your body on that food log as well, you can start making those connections. And that's one of my jobs as a nutrition coach, to look at this, to help the client interpret that food diary and be like, hey, I've noticed that, you've had a sandwich for lunch every Monday, and every Wednesday you seem to have a sinus congestion problem. So let's kind of take a look and see what might be going on there. So I think it's a very, very valuable tool. And I usually have most of my clients start out with at least a 3-day to a week journal. So I can assess what they're having and assess their nutrient intake, but also kind of look at symptoms and see if there's any sort of correlation.
Yeah, so you can see what patterns come up over time.
No, definitely.
Food to symptom, not having food, still having symptom, or not having symptoms. So yeah, I guess a lot you can learn from taking an approach like that.
Oh, absolutely. And most people just think like, oh, food, it will affect my digestive system. So if something bothers me, I'll get gas, or I'll get bloating, or I'll have digestive pains, or it'll affect, my stool, whether it be constipated or loose stool. But like I said before, it can also be a headache or brain fog or blurred vision or congestion in the body. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a digestive symptom for you, as a sensitivity or intolerance to show itself.
You spoke about inflammation quite a few times, and I hear that a lot too. How do we know that there's inflammation, and how do you measure it? Like, what are you looking at to understand that there could be inflammation anywhere in the body?
Well, and there are definitely labs that you can order that will measure sort of inflammation. But if we look at, symptom-wise, there are many ways that the body shows that it's inflamed. Headaches are inflammation. Redness or skin breakouts or inflammation. Skin is a major detoxification organ in the body. So if it cannot get things out of the body in the normal way, like through liver and kidney detoxification, then the skin is going to start showing signs that, like kind of like an overspilling of toxins. So acne, eczema, other sorts of rashes, those are all signs that the body is inflamed and trying to detox a bit. If something is bothering it. You can also, show inflammation through, obviously, gut pain. If you're having a lot of diarrhea or loose stools, that is showing that your gut is a bit inflamed. So there's so many different ways where inflammation manifests itself. And inflammation is really the key underliner of most disease, right? So it is something that really we can't ignore, because if you don't want that to progress into something worse. So it's definitely something to pay attention to.
And obviously you'll know if you're feeling better, but are there ways to measure improvements too? Is there anything on blood work or on any other way that, if you go through this process of trying to, look in how you can eat better to improve fatigue or increase energy, how do you know that, aside from feeling better, that you're making progress?
Yeah, that's why it's good to have a full panel of blood work when you come to see somebody initially. And then 3 months or 4 months down the line, we can retest and we can see, okay, has there been changes in this? Because the body responds pretty quickly to positive changes. The body has this great ability to heal itself when given the tools to heal and to find balance again. And so within 3 to 4 months, if we were to retest lab work, we should see some significant changes. And then maybe 6 months down the line, you'd see even more. And that's another point that I think is really important to note, is that a lot of our diseases or imbalances occur over a long period of time. Right? The body is incredibly resilient, and it has so many different mechanisms to create balance and to find the balance again when you throw it off. But so disease takes a long time to manifest. And when you start on your health journey, you're not going to reverse all that within a matter of 6 weeks or 2 months. We can certainly start to see some steps towards progress, but just as it took a while for the body to find the imbalance or become imbalanced, it's going to take some time to get the balance back and to fully heal the body. And I think because we are such a culture of, I need immediate results. We want a pill for every answer. We need immediate results, that I think people get very impatient with not seeing those results right away when they start to make dietary or habit changes. And it takes a while to establish a new habit, right? It takes about 6 months or so for that new habit to really become part of your life. So you have to be patient with yourself. You have to be full of grace and full of love for yourself when you start on this health journey, and really trust that your body is working in the best way it can when you give it the tools that it needs.
I can totally see how the patience part of this is probably a very hard part about coaching somebody through this process. And we truly are looking for results, and sometimes we're not. Our expectations about how quickly those results are going to come are just unrealistic. And with that said, I see a lot of these diets out there that almost seem to be like magic bullets, if you may. Like the let's take for instance the Atkins diet. There's been so many different diets through the years. Atkins, paleo. And ideally somebody would come to you, do a full analysis, and look at the unique things about them and how to take the next steps based off of those unique characteristics. But let's just say that somebody doesn't have the means or the time, or they just don't get around to doing it. Is there one type of diet or just one way you can say, hey, if you do these things or you stick with this type of diet, you're probably going to most likely, if you may, be in the best position to see some results or have the best possibility of seeing some success?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There, as I said before, everybody's individual, and everybody, what works for one person may not work for somebody else. So when you look at all these diets, you're like, oh wow, my neighbor's an awesome vegan. They lost 30 pounds. They're looking great. They feel great. And then I try being a vegan, and I stuck on the couch and can't get my body moving. It just doesn't work. So where to start? That's a great question. I want to kind of put it in the context of financial area here. There was a great quote from Bethany Frankel, and reality TV star and all that. But what she said was a really great quote. She said, "Your diet is a bank account, and good food choices are good investments." So let's start there. Thinking of your body, you want to put in food that helps to build that account and not deplete it, right? You want more in your bank account than you're taking out. So when we're talking in a general way, we want to make sure we're putting in foods that help to build the body and not drain the body. So what are those foods? Well, first, to drain the body, the foods that drain the body would be more like your processed foods and your sugar. Dairy and gluten for some people, as we mentioned. But this is the place to start. If you don't have the means to see a nutritionist or to figure things out on your own, simply cutting back sugar and processed foods would be the place I would recommend starting. Processed foods and sugar drain the body of valuable nutrient stores. They put your body on this constant roller coaster of blood sugar. You're going up and down. You get that high and then you drop, and you get a high and then you drop, and you go get all these crazy cravings. All right, this is when 3 p.m. in the afternoon, you're like, I cannot go another minute without a coffee and a chocolate bar. Your body is not sustaining energy for long periods of time. So watching how much sugar you're eating, soda is a great way to take in a lot of sugar in a short amount of time. So, looking at your consumption of soda, looking at your consumption of processed foods and sugars, and trying to replace those with more nutrient-dense foods, adding in more complex carbohydrates like whole grains and vegetables, adding in more fruits instead of sugar if you do have sugar cravings. Berries are a great place to start. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, all of those. Very high amount of nutrients and antioxidants and phytonutrients in there. And making sure that you're consuming a good variety of proteins and fats, and high quality proteins and fats. Those are foods that are going to energize you and put money in the bank. And the others are going to have you overdrawing.
Okay, so we're just about out of time. Caryn, I want to thank you for being on the show. You gave us some great information. How best can someone reach out to you or find more information about what you do?
Well, you can certainly go to my website. It's www.appetitesforlife.com, and that's FOR spelled out. And on my website, I have a free download of a Reclaim Your Energy ebook, and it covers a lot of the things that we talked about and even more. So I really encourage listeners, if they want to find out more about how to reclaim their energy, how to eat more nutrient-dense foods, and overcome fatigue, and just generally being tired every day, to download that book. And hopefully that'll help you on your path to get started.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, we'll link to all that in the show notes. And thanks again for being on.
Thank you so much, guys. It was great to be here.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.